Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you a little bit of a post-event recap, some pictures, little synopsis. So if you didn't tune into a video I had done earlier in the week, just talking about the breakdown of the scenarios that I had planned. I've run this before. I ran this twice before, small runs with just a few people, and I had planned to do it at a local game store with as many as 6 tables. Unfortunately, a good majority of the people had to cancel at the last second, but we had 4 players, which was nice, and they had some pretty interesting feedback and some good feedback, very positive on how this was run. This was run to be very much different from the steamroller type tournament structure. And I wanted to try and do something that was different so I could show it to the community, so I could show it to other tournament organizers, and also something that I could ramp up and do at a larger scale. So the way it works is that there's 3 scenarios, and it's really embracing the imbalance inherent in the Age of Sigmar and how the game is structured, or in some people would say lack of structure, and taking advantage of the fact that you have a game that can work very well with a narrative scenario structure that's linked, where there's implications on games that impact the following game and such. And I did a video kind of going over how the scenarios worked. And the example I've always used is that Age of Sigmar allows you to do things like Last Stand of the 300, a small force against an overwhelming invader. And you can't do that in a balanced scenario type structure, which is what most tournament type games allow. Now, if you want to play tournaments, that's fine. I'm not knocking tournament structure or, the effort to try and create even sides as much as possible. I think that kind of neuters a lot of what Age of Sigmar is about. It's kind of like cooking a burger till it's a charcoal mess, where all the juices are just cooked right out of it on the grill, and there's nothing really left. It just becomes very bland, and you lose a lot of the wonder of being able to take what you want when you overcomp. That doesn't mean that comp isn't a good thing, and there's comp certainly in this to try and rein in some of the crazy, try and limit some of the over-the-top stuff you can do in a game like this, and reward people who embrace it and are really kind of going, trying to achieve the objectives of the scenario while also trying to compete and try to become the best general within those parameters. One of the people that was able to come was Ant, formerly known as the artist of the Sustainable Center, but now is HR on YouTube. And we've both been on a number of our videos. He's one of the guys I follow when I first started looking to go and jump into YouTube. So just check him out on his new channel, because he's relaunched his channel. And he's talking about a variety of different things. And some of it is also AoS. But he was able to come, and he's a very competitive player. He plays a lot of different games. He was a diehard Warhammer player before Age of Sigmar, up until 8th edition, very strong in the competitive scene, and had a pretty following then. And I hope he builds it back now with his new channel, but he's able to come, and he's had a lot of criticisms and views on Age of Sigmar that I don't agree with all of them, but I agree with some, and I was glad that he was able to come and just check this out as an alternative to some of the efforts that others have made in trying to package Age of Sigmar into the old tournament style gaming and try to see something different. He put up a video about it. He had some nice things to say. He had some criticisms too. He's entitled to his opinion. He certainly had some good points that I think I might actually utilize in future structures that I'm looking to do. And I'm doing this on my own as a part of a new initiative, Tremendous Damage. But I also work with another group called the Gamer Grunts, who is they're trying to do something that's again a little bit less like this and more of this traditional tournament. Balance things out with even type games within their structure, and they have some really good ideas too. But this is some of the things I want to go on and do on my own, and I'm hoping to grow it, and I'm hoping you're going to enjoy it. So I'm going to show you some pictures from some of the other games, and then I'm going to show you the battle report for games that I was playing at the same time, because we had some open tables, of course. Again, this is Ant's army, and he took the opportunity, of course, to play some of his old Bretonnians and Wood Elves. And this is just a great line here. I think this is awesome, because he just has this long line of cav, a highly mobile force, and it looked really cool. And you can see, there's interspliced here some of the fast-moving, shooty Wood Elves with the hard-hitting Bretonnians, which work really well in Age of Sigmar. And he's playing the invader. The way I've done it, and again, I'm going to talk about this as I go through the pictures, so as I go through the pictures, I'll demonstrate what you're looking at. Again, you're a larger force invading the forward outposts of a weaker opponent. and the weaker opponent had at least 30% more, or less rather, in terms of their forces, and was defending a mountain pass. And we had these nice boards, these themed boards, and I put on each of them, you can see this is a side, I put these dividers here, just a little bit of spray paint for mountain caps on each side, with some structures that could be manned on either side of about a 2.5 to 3 foot gap in the center. And so this is a chaos force. Obviously, I told everybody, bring what you want, because you don't have to stick to a specific list each time. You don't have to build a list out. And deployment was normal. But how you deployed and the measure of how much the attacker, the invader, deployed up to a maximum would dictate certain benefits and boons that the defender would have, to try and help even out a little bit, but so we can have a semblance of some fairness, but give some benefit to somebody who's playing the entrenched defender, even though they had some benefits as well. For instance, so some units, infantry type units with only 1 wound, would have bonuses to their cover save if they were entrenched in some of the tower structures, indicating that they were they understood their ground, that they've been practicing to defend their homeland, whatever it might be, for quite some time. So they got some minor boons. It could be things like rerolls to hit, rerolls to wound. You get 1 for every 20 wounds you're outnumbered. Nothing big, but it could be something like increased chance to unbind, longer distance to unbind. People still took very good themed armies, I thought, really stuck to the faction. Even though I allowed the opportunity for you to take a secondary faction, I wanted a primary faction to be chosen from, order, chaos, death, and destruction, but you could take up to half your army in the secondary faction, just to give some flexibility if people wanted to be a little more creative. But everybody really stuck to just one faction, which I was kind of surprised, even though they had the option to do so. So this was a force, again, roughly around 80 wounds. We're just using wounds as a general benchmark. It's not the balancing factor, but just so that people had an idea, gauge of what kind of stuff they could bring to the table. But the scenario really dictated a lot of things. So again, if you took your 1 wound forces with certain types of benefits, you could gain certain advantages, and certainly what units you took, depending on what your role was, would also dictate what kind of benefits you get. Are you going to get certain extra boons, benefits from some rerolls, maybe rerolls or armor saves throughout the course of your game because you're outmatched? Do you have a better defensive structure because you're outmatched? The offensive player had to achieve a certain goal, getting off the table edge of your opponent within a certain period of time to gain benefits in the second game. So they would get, say, a reinforcement benefit. The disadvantaged player had to, and this is the march down the field of the huge mounted cavalry line of the Bretonnians and Wood Elves towards Chaos, which was very much focused as a corn army. And if the defender could last till to turn 4, to turn 5, to turn 6 without being wiped out, they gained benefits in the second game. And then the second game, which is a little bit more evenly matched, had also you took the gains that you may have achieved from the first game. And now you're trying to do something else, which I'll get into in a second, and that could impact the third game, where things might swing a little bit more in the favor of the defender. And you'll see, I'll go into that in more detail. So here's one of the other tables. This was a more of a forest wilderness board, but this is the Skaven being the defender up against another order force, mainly Bretonnians and Stormcast combined. And again, this was another one where the invader took advantage heavily of being able to outmatch the defender. I thought some people might take advantages of and try to minimize some of these boons, but everybody went to the maximum on the attacking units. And it certainly balanced out over the course of the games, as you'll see. Here's where Ant's force just smashed into the lines of the defenders, and although it may be a little bit cheeky, he ran up a whole bunch of his Grail Knights into the tower, which, I don't know to be argued with that. The rules allow it, but obviously, as we could see from the recent FAQ, they say pretty much to use some common sense. Horses don't walk up walls. Chariots don't ride up, sheer walls. So unless you can fly, you shouldn't be able to do that. But one thing I did say is that invading these towers was you were attacking, these towers as if you were you were attacking all the units in the tower if you were within 1 inch. So you can garrison the units depending on what kind of forces you took. So I don't know if they had a gentleman's agreement and said, okay, while they're inside, maybe the horses don't get to attack or something like that. I don't know. I don't know if what they did, but whatever happened, it worked out just fine and everybody had a good time. So just to give you the how it ended, everybody seemed to have a very good time with it, and we'll see what happens here. So yeah, this is again. Oh, this was a force where somebody had some fire slayers. Again, more of an order versus chaos force. So you could see the larger forces here, and this may look like a lot of bodies, but certainly a considerable weakness considering the volume of wounds on the order side attacking the Skaven-themed chaos. A little bit different perspective picture here, and probably as they had marched further into the board, a meeting, clashing in the middle here. Again, I think that in this game, Ant was able to punch through and kind of just roll right through, as I would imagine a fully armored and mobile cav list probably should. It really kind of worked out the way it should have, and it kind of was funny because he just steamrolled right through this in game one. Obviously, some of it things turned later on in the game, but he did very well in the tournament. You can see he just busted through. His effort was to try and just run right through and get off the table edge on the other side, and I think the mass majority of his army just barreled through, and he gained the maximum benefits for game two, which is why he did well in the game too. So this unit matched up against the Skaven, and I think it was a little bit more of an evenly matched game, this one. I don't think it was quite the steamroller. I don't remember who won this one, but I definitely think that this was a longer battle. It took longer to play because it was a different type of a force, and it was much more interesting seeing how the Skaven can hold up as more of a defensive force. Here's some of the. I think actually they did very well. I think the only units that got off the table, I think the Skaven were able to kind of edge out in the overall points benefit and boon benefit that they got for game two, because they held back most of this force. I think most of the flyers were able to get over. This is game two, and so in game two, the way it was described is for the most part we assume in the story that the invaders, again, overwhelming force, were able to punch through and able to break through the forward outpost, and are now pillaging throughout this invaded territory, maybe looking for a kidnapped victim, maybe looking for some arcane treasure, some relic, whatever it is. They're now descending on one of these defensive outposts, this tower, which can be manned by the defender. Once again, this is the same. I mixed up the teams, so the same people weren't playing each other, but for the final game, it would be the ranked people. But in this case, it was the defender was able to deploy anywhere within 8 inches of the tower and within the tower, and they gained the benefit depending on the type of unit of additional cover. But the attacker, which again had the benefit of slightly more, not quite as much in the first game, but slightly more units to bring to bear, also, depending on how well you did in the first game, you may have gotten some extra reinforcements. So the defender might, rallying. Obviously, their lands are being invaded. More of their people are learning about it. More of their forces are being rallied up to join the. So they had a great chance, depending on how well they did in the first game, how many turns they had lasted. They would gain the benefit of maybe 10 or 20 extra wounds, or so, a unit or two of additional forces that would come on with the capability of coming on starting in turn two in that scenario. And of course, if the attacker was doing well, they would get some other benefits in addition. And how well they again outmatched the defender in the starting number that was defending this tower would also provide the defender with some boons. But still, it was an overwhelming force, or at least a substantially outnumbered force. And this is at the point where they started clashing in the middle. I know this looks like one of those scrum in the middle type things, but the scenario really had a little more depth than that. Especially considering that you had a specific role you were understanding. You already were garrisoning a center, and the defender didn't have to just sit in the tower. They could have gone out and slowed people down, because again, this is one of those scenarios where it's not timed in terms of how long you play, even though it's the case for the tournament structure. But it is timed in such that the attacker really needs to get in there and kind of wipe out the defenders to gain benefits in the third game. And the defender, once again, the longer that they can last here, and they're a little bit better off than in the first game, the better benefits they have in the last game, where some of their forces now are trying to expel the attackers from their land. So we see again, this is a just one of those Aztec type, I guess, structures for this particular board. So this was again the I believe it was the Skaven against taking on. This I think his Ant had switched over. Now he's attacking the forces of the Skaven. One thing I think that will be changing for the future is we had it where the attackers could come from any board edge, any 4 board edges. The problem is that these short board edges are really short, and in any case where you have a cav or fast-moving units, it's really just you're charging pretty much turn 1, and that was a little bit tough. So one of the feedbacks that I gotten, and which I wish I had implemented for this game, was we're going to make it for these types where the attackers are only coming from the long board edges. So it makes it a little bit quicker. I mean, a little bit longer for the attacker to get there, and a little bit better chance for some of the reinforcements to actually show up on the table. So Ant did pretty well with this. He gained a whole bunch of benefits from the first game, which really had an impact. And he rolled all over and right through this Skaven group. But I think Skaven put up a reasonable defense, but it didn't last very long. There was just too many benefits that the Bretonnians and the Wood Elves had gained in the previous turn. So here we see the other flip side. So here is looks like a defending army for the Order, and I guess they were being assaulted by the Skaven. I'm not sure which game this was. This might be game 3 here. So the third game is where the defending army, I think that's what we're looking at here. Yes, the defending army now has, just in terms of story, not in terms of what happened in the actual game, but in terms of story, they were wiped out from this particular outpost, or the outpost that had been overrun, because we're going to assume that there's several, and this is just one slice of a larger story. That they had been overrun at these defensive outposts. Now they're being manned by the attacker from the previous scenario, the previous games. And the defender now has rallied reinforcements and their army to go and try and expel these guys from their territory. So in this case, the roles have been flipped a little bit. The attackers now are trying to escape from this central point, and the defenders now can deploy throughout the table and are now trying to stop them from escaping or destroy them before they get off the table edge. Either way, the point structure, the victory point structure, is such that the attackers now have to get away. They got to get off any of these table edges. These defenders now, or this is the rallied army of the defenders that are now trying to stop them. So it just creates a different type of a situation, and the defenders now they get the benefit of being able to take more units and have benefits from whatever successes they had in previous games, and it's just a challenge to overcome. And what is typically going to be these faster moving units from what was previously attackers. So this is in this game, the defender now can position more troops, bigger troops, and we see that here as well. I think this is Anthony's Cav army just circling the defenses here. I think he had the Green Knight and the Fey Enchantress with just chaos all over, basically saying, okay, you took our territory, now watch the full might of chaos and try to get away. In which case, I think he had a completely different result. Even though he had benefits from the previous 2 games that really helped him, I think the only thing he managed to get off in this game was the Green Knight. I mean, I think he might have gotten something else off. So really flipped over for the other side. These are the top 2 players. And I just want to mention again that this turned out to be number 1 and number 2 for the game. I think we saw Archaon on that board. You can see that the Skaven really were able to try and take huge advantage in this game of the masses of what Skaven can be to try and prevent the forces of order from getting away with whatever goods that they had. Again, it's nice to be able to have the opportunity to overcome some big challenges where you have just an outmatched force, trying not just in terms of being beat down, but knowing that you're at a big disadvantage, and how well are you going to do? How well are you going to mitigate those disadvantages? And then as a stronger force, you have a goal to meet. Not just, hey, I'm going to kill everything you have and I'm going to have a good time, and you're not going to this game. It was more than just that. So it seemed like everybody's, had an enjoyable time within that framework, and I was pretty happy about that. But I was a little disappointed that more people weren't able to show. I had about 6 other people. I had about 10 other people that were supposed to be coming to this, and I was worried that I was going to have to turn people away, which, I guess that was an unfortunate benefit that some people had to, change plans at the last second. But I'll be running this and modifications of this and other scenario types of this kind, including mega battles that you can see in this game. the forces of order have just, they're going to all points of the map, really giving the Skaven some fits here. Much more mobile force in the order sense. Skaven, Stormcast, and Brett's. And I think that this guy left the dwarves to just sit there and take on whatever punishment was meted down in this tower to try and let everybody else get a chance to get away, which just is hysterical. I think that worked out very fun. But that was very fluffy. And I like Anthony's suggestion. He put on his channel that he liked these like really story-driven ideas of how things like the most heroic general or most heroic moment, most cowardly moment. These are things I'm going to introduce. I like those ideas. I'm going to still introduce and continue with a victory point structure based on certain goals, so that there is a little bit of a competitive element. But again, it is a scenario where they're linked. You're looking to achieve those goals, so there's some competition that's involved. It's not the same thing as if you're trying to create artificially some balance with points or pools or whatever that some other steamroller type tournaments will have that are historically what you would see. This is a different type of a thing, more akin to what Warhammer is played based on what GW has published, what they produced, even through back previous editions. But it's embracing the idea that you could have lopsided, disproportionate power in the games with the different opponents, and letting the scenario dictate how that what measure of competitiveness you'll have based on what those objectives are, which are going to be different depending on what you're defending or attacking force. And I'm looking to do a lot of vastly different things with this, even providing elevations, different levels of elevations in the game, so that obviously it's going to play havoc with shooty armies or armies with big war machines. It's going to benefit many armies where you will have fast-moving units, maybe even interesting deployment capabilities with various different armies with their battalions or inherent into the war scrolls. So there's going to be different things I want to experiment with that are going to be non-traditional and maybe even a little bit wacky, but are really embracing the idea that there's a tale to be told, and you're going to be competing to achieve these various different goals at different levels. Sometimes you may be a little bit outnumbered. Sometimes you may be the person that is outnumbered, and force people to try and think outside the box. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we're going to see more. And I think it's the way Age of Sigmar is best. It shines with that. And of course, these were more mid-sized games. There were some large armies which could amount to anywhere from 120 to 140 wounds, which is, I think, at the upper level of what you can get in a hour and a half to 2 hour time slot for a 3-game event, which will encompass between 10 or 11 o'clock all the way to like 5 or 6. We were able to get everybody finishing every single game with the exception of a single one. Sorry for that blurry picture. In this time period, and I think that really worked out nicely. I think that was a great benefit, that nobody really felt like, hey, I didn't have an opportunity to at least finish this game. I'm going to end off here with Ant's picture, but put the cap on it is look, there's no right or wrong way to play this game. You want to play tournament structure where there's points given to these war scrolls, fine. If that's the way it's enjoyment for you, wonderful. Go do that. If you want to have pools, if you want to have the ability to summon with certain pools, you can play that way. In this game, I wanted to try and give everybody the freedom of the ability to summon whatever they wanted, which was much less summoning than I thought it was going to be. But every instant that you summon within that game turn, you would have an ever-increasing -1 to the summoning roll. And that way somebody couldn't just do chain summoning with and there was no, if you summon something in it could cast, they weren't able to cast the turn they came in. And I know those are things that have been FAQ'd where GW has said, yeah, you could do all this stuff, it's complete freedom. But I wanted to make it so that if somebody wanted to create a themed army like this one with no summoning, they get some kind of benefits, or not benefits, but you wouldn't get out of control. Somebody was not going to summon a greater demon, and that greater demon is going to summon another greater demon, and then that someone's going to summon another greater demon. Even though we all know, and we should, people who understand this game, that's hard to do. It's hard to do. But you could also have a situation where somebody deploys, as Ant put out as an example, 50 necromancers. And eventually you're going to get you don't have to have anything else. You just have 50 necromancers, or 20 necromancers, and that can just build your army from there. And that could get out of control. That's a little douchebaggy, but it could be done. If you want to play that game, go ahead and do it. I would enjoy playing against that once, or maybe once in a blue moon. The same way as the argument that people have about playing 10 Nagashes, which I think I would never want to face, but maybe just one time ever and see how that works. But in any case, the idea here is we're trying to create a narrative story and try to do something that embraces what Age of Sigmar is about without trying to change it into what 8th edition was, or what the Steamroller events are. If you like those games, great, but I would encourage you to try these types of things. Try making link scenarios with these boons. Look at my other video, and you can see some of the lists that I put in there on some of the things that people might get depending on how well they're outmatched, and some of the things you might do to try and have some light comp to limit the game. I call it light comp because I don't look at it as putting a kibosh on summoning and then boom, that's the end of it. I like the idea of saying, hey, you can summon every turn something. You have a chance to do that if you want, but let's not make it an endless thing where you're just filling up your board side, which is entirely possible if you build a list in a certain way. And astonishingly, people had gone in the opposite direction. It was very summoning light. And in addition, I created a benefit for any player who had no summoning, which Ant didn't take advantage of at all, which was that if you had a quantity accelerator ability, meaning if you had, say, 20 dwarves quarrelers, if they have 20 in their unit and they can shoot twice when they get to 20, but if you knock them down to 18, they lose that. There's a bunch of units in close combat, and I'll have a lot of them in shooting, that get that. And then all of a sudden, if they're weaker, they lose it. Like skeletons have that, but skeletons are typically from a summoning type army. But you could take a undead army and have no necromancers if you wanted to do that. Nobody who can summon, and then boom, you would have the benefit. The way it would work is you would gain that benefit no matter how small that unit got. So if you had 50 skeletons but no summoners, you took no death wizards of any kind in your army. Let's say your general was a White King, for example, and you just didn't take anything else, and you had all these skeletons, or if you took corpse carts and zombies, tons of zombies, you get all the benefits of the volume of these units, and they would never decrease as the units went below those thresholds. Again, only if you took no summoners. And I think that really worked out nicely, and I'm going to try to implement that down the road because it's one little trade-off. It's not going to equal things out necessarily. The scenario has to do that, in my opinion. But I wanted to give the freedom for people to make the choice. And if they didn't make the choice, they maybe got a little bit of a benefit. Nothing dramatic. Obviously, you could see in this army, there's no volume benefits from having an all-cav army. But of course, it had its own inherent benefits in how it was structured, and it looked pretty impressive. So I was pretty happy about that. So hats off to the people who played. They had, they had made some suggestions, sort of like the table edges, where having to cover all 4 table edges when the short edges are so close. Say in scenario 2, which is what I'm going to implement. They did have a lot of positive things to say otherwise. And again, I think the most important thing is everybody had a good time, and they played something different that really you couldn't do if you were just doing the same balancing structure that we've seen a lot of other events. So try things out, experiment, see what else is out there, see what other possibilities are out there. I love to see what other people have. I love to see people's feedback. And, I hope people, if they're in the region, join into the growing camp games and events that I'm going to be running. And if you're running an event, I'd love to hear about yours too. I'm definitely interested in ideas that people have. We're going to be looking to grow the community and try experiment with different things. And I don't think there's any one right way, or certainly no wrong way to play this game. Again, if you're having fun, your fun isn't wrong. Have a good day, everybody.